Remember that time that the last X-Men movie was gonna actually be two X-Men movies, but then Disney was in the wheelings and dealings of buying Fox, and mysteriously it just became a one X-Men movie, and they come out, and clearly there was some back room dealings going on because everybody was just kind of like, I hate it before it even came out.
Yeah, and it failed miserably.
And it fails miserably, and everybody, derides it and all that stuff.
I remember that time. That was a pretty cool time.
One so long ago because we're talking about Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix, of course, is the last in the Fox efforts, unless they ever release New Mutants, which they might retool and release under the MCU banner. But look, the history of the X-Men at Fox is a
thing,
an uneven and shaky thing, shambolic, some would say, just because that word hasn't been used in like 30 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's the most uneven continuity possibly out there. But there was something charming about the movies, even at their worst, with the exception of Wolverine Origins.
Terrible.
Even at their worst, there was something that I think a lot of people were rooting for to continue to be good, to be better, or whatever, I certainly was in that camp, and I think a lot of people's enthusiasm for them was reinvigorated with the First Class era of movies. And, again, the reviews were up and down about all of those, but this was the last. It was, it was supposed to be a new era too, but the deals ended that, so it was going to be the last. Overwhelmingly negative reviews.
Failed.
I wouldn't even say tepid response. It was more like people were out with a pitchfork to destroy this, and maybe villager mentality a la Frankenstein was in play. And by maybe, I mean clearly. So, okay, fine, the MCU bias. Let's just put that to the side because we don't even have that to worry about. Look, this thing was never meant to be MCU good. I don't think any of the X-Men movies besides, like Logan or something, were aiming for that. But where does this stand in the big picture? The answer is, I think, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe not, is that this is not as bad as everyone painted it out to be, but it's not great either. But it's kind of like miraculous how well, quote unquote, it comes together, given that it had to kind of be patched, cut, reshot, re-edited together into something that was just one movie when it was intended to be two big movies. So there's that. So we'll talk about it, how we feel about it, whatever. I'm going to tell you straight up off the bat, I don't hate this movie. I don't think it deserved to get lambasted like it did. And I think we all know deep down that a lot of that had to do with, like the way a lot of MCU fans act. We just want this shit back home. Hey, I'm with you. But at the same time, it wasn't at home yet. Could you at least try to, give it a chance? The fact is it didn't get a chance and it was cut down. So what we have here is you could tell that there's a lot of stuff missing in this movie throughout. There's like some, I'm not going to say time jumps, but there's just, it progresses at a rate that feels both slow and fast for the material. I don't know how to explain that, but it somehow feels both slow and fast for what the story is supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you're looking for a loyal version of the Dark Phoenix saga, why? None of these X-Men movies have ever been remotely loyal to any of the material.
I'll say this, I'm not an X-mite.
You're not an X-Men fan. I like the X-Men, but I never ever expect loyal to the material X story. Yeah. And anybody that did is a damned fool because we never had one of those ever. So, the story of the Phoenix Force being in Jean's body, we get that, and then we just kind of run on that concept of whatever, and then the new stuff is jammed in and here and there, whatever. We're not even gonna focus on that because we shouldn't have even expected that. Okay, so where do you stand on this picture? Would you say you recommend this to somebody?
It depends.
To watch?
If you're an
X-Men fan.
Yeah,
of the movie.
I think, look, I'm not a huge X-Men fan, but I have liked Like I liked First Class. I
Mhm.
thought Days of Future Past was okay. I didn't hate Apocalypse. I think I liked this better than Apocalypse,
Mhm.
which by default makes it I liked it better than Days of Future Past. Um, but like you said, it's not amazing,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's that bad, and I actually liked a lot of it. I kind of like that it's this kind of slower movie.
Mhm.
It's not like this huge explosions every 2 seconds. Actually, it kind of takes a long time for stuff to start
Right.
happening, and I like that because it gives it kind of like that, kind of gives it a little more grounded feel. Which I
Yeah.
know when you go into your X-Men movie, you don't want a grounded feel, but it does kind of work for the material, and it does kind of help with some of the shortcomings of the Phoenix. Um, I don't know if you'll agree with that, but she was kind of
For somebody that's supposed to be embodying a cosmic force of that level of power, we get very little context as to how powerful she is, even when she fully displays her power.
yeah, and not even that, like just on a struggle level,
Yeah.
it's so like shallow.
Yeah.
Like up until the point where spoiler Mystique gets impaled, she's already having this kind of struggle, but there's like nothing there. You're like, why?
Well, okay, I'm gonna slightly disagree on this because I think that was one of the strongest points. Hear me out on this, not that specifically, but it ties into it. I think thematically, the movie, that's kind of what holds the movie together for me. The thematics of it. This idea of division being brought out. So the moment the Phoenix Force enters Jean, it not only causes division in her mind, it causes division in her relationships with people. Then that leads to division among the team. Then that leads to division among friends
Yeah, but that
and
all comes later. Like up to that point, there's not really much of that.
well, yeah, but that's the setup. You know what I'm saying? Up to that point, that's the setup. So I think ultimately that film ties in completely with this idea of division, and ultimately, like, as a film about division would resolve, obviously, with cohesion. So I think that setup works thematically. I think that's, for me, that's what pulled the movie together. That's kind of what kept me interested for the most part. Um, I agree with you a lot on the idea that this movie being a lot slower paced and building up to something, I like that quite a bit. I do feel that could have benefited greatly from when Phoenix, or I should say, when Jean Grey goes rogue. We could have used a couple of scenes to really get a feeling for why, people would fear this on a larger scale,
Yeah, exactly.
because we have the thematic of division on the larger scale, because at this point in the movie the X-Men are being accepted socially.
Yeah.
So the Phoenix being out there causes social division among their relationship regarding the X-Men, so they turn on them again. But we never got to see an example of why that would happen.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like that is kind of like some of her inner struggle is that she's hurting people around her,
Yeah.
but you don't really see that
Yeah.
because nothing really happens other than that time she goes, whoosh, and hurts a couple people,
Yeah.
but they're okay. You know what I mean? Like up to that point, that's all that you had gotten, and thankfully that does change as the movie goes along. But yeah, it does kind of feel a little for a movie that takes its time to build up so much, that feels a little too fast.
Yeah, it really, really could have used a couple of scenes that just showed how this rogue power is a danger
Yeah.
to everybody and why everybody would suddenly turn on them, other than, they're just waiting for a reason to hate mutants. It lacks that. So when the action heavy stuff comes in at the end, some people and other reviews refer to it as tacked on. I disagree.
Nah, it
It
builds
built
up.
up to
Yeah.
that really nicely. I just think that had we had a few little action sequences in between to show that Phoenix power, it would have felt a lot more impactful when that scene comes in at the end. Now, let's talk about the action. There is action, and again, it's more heavy towards the end, and there's a little bit at the beginning. I think effects-wise, this movie looks great. However, I think Simon Kinberg here first coming in as a director, he'd been a producer in this series and co-writer for a while, but I think here as a director, I think some of the non-action stuff, he did quite well. And even some of the action stuff, again, really nice looking, and it gels well. There's some really nice action pieces, but compared to other directors in the series like Matthew Vaughn or Bryan Singer, unfortunately, there's not a lot of dynamism to his action sequences. It's not totally bereft of that. They are nice and they are very entertaining and they look cool.
I think,
But comparatively, his action is a little bit lacking to these other directors in the series.
I think I would agree with you on that for the most part, through most of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Up until that final scene in the train.
Yeah.
That scene I thought was really well done and cool.
And that's one of the ones that was reshot and added to the film.
Yeah, so. It had a lot of really cool use of powers, and it just felt pretty damn cool. You know, I would even say like the scene leading up to that, where they're in the city, that also felt really well done.
Yeah, when they're attacking that, when their two rival factions are going to hunt out Jean Grey, that concept is cool. The idea of Magneto being dragged back in because Jean Grey did something bad to someone he loved. Well, you already spoiled that, so Mystique is killed by Jean Grey. So he's on the rampage again. I like that idea of drudging Magneto back out and dragging him back into his vengeful ways. That was cool. And that led, of course, to this confrontation. I'm gonna go on the opposite end of that. I thought the way it was shot left a lot to be desired. Like, you didn't really get to see much of the confrontation between the two sides at that point. It's more when they get together again that you get to see them really on full display. I feel it was a little like, frantically shot and stuff. And I'm like, maybe that was intentional to give the idea of a frenetic situation. But visually, I was like, I'm not seeing much here. But there was some cool stuff. It's not totally bereft of awesomeness there either. But yeah, I do feel that it, like you said, it builds up really well to these things so that they feel like a payoff. So, take that with the good or the bad. Now, we got a lot of returning faces, and as expected, we get some new, blood. There's a hair guy, not the coolest power.
Yeah, grody hair dude, I called him.
As far as New Mutants go here in this one, not very impressive. A lot. But there's not a lot of New Mutants to deal with anyway. The returning mutants, I think they're all good across the board, yeah? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, Cyclops' face is ugly. But...
Well, Cyclops' face is, in fact, ugly, but, you got to deal with that.
Yeah.
Them lips, though. Hideous. Worms on his face. There is a very obvious... We all knew going into this movie that Jennifer Lawrence didn't want to do the X-Men movies anymore. And so there's a very obvious, like, writer out build up, quote unquote, to her character. I feel like I realized she didn't want to come in anymore. And again, I have to make, leeway for the fact that this thing was 2 movies that didn't get to be fulfilled the way they were intended, and they cut it down to 1. But I feel they should have left a little bit open with her. She didn't necessarily have to be the final person to play Mystique. They should have left at least something open for her, not make it so conclusive, so that in terms of the fabric of the weird continuity of this series, we would have had that to go on. Because there's, they still leave a lot there that connects to what we've seen overall. So, whatever, But overall, I think everybody did a pretty decent job. I'm still not sold on Sophie Turner's American accent. She has a very husky voice, so it sounds weird.
I think. Well, I thought you were gonna go with her, but I'm not sold on her. I think she's she doesn't feel right in the role.
Well, I think she's not the Jean that a lot of people are accustomed to. So there's that.
I don't care about X-Men, so I'm not like Ma Jean. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, but she's also not the Jean that you're accustomed to, which would be, I guess, the Famke Janssen.
I didn't like her either, though.
But, the point is...
She feels odd.
Some people like her, some don't. I think she's fine. I just have a problem with her accent, which is weird sounding. It's not a bad accent, it's just her voice doesn't lend to its credibility as an American accent. So it's just a thing. I do feel she could have done a lot more to communicate the idea of conflict within her,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you'll agree with, as you have said. And so yeah, I mean, I'm not championing her. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying like that accent that.
Yeah, and this was kind of something I felt in the previous movie too, but she was barely in there,
Right.
so it wasn't a huge thing. This, like, the whole thing kind of rides on her, and yeah, like I don't know if it's something with her or it's just they needed to expand her a little more, but it was a little disappointing on her. She does, I think, kind of grow into it, like when she has the power at the end. You're kind of like, okay, I can see why they would pick her, but for a while I was like, she's not that great, is she?
Yeah. Now I could see a lot of the stuff here working a lot better again if they had let this two-part intentional, as it was intentioned, two-part movie to actually happen. Because though we get what's going on with Magneto and all that stuff, that those elements, some of those elements like that, fleshed out, would have led to a more satisfying turn for the character. He's awesome as he always is. Fassbender is cool. But I feel like there was a lot of substance missing there. Especially the way they punctuate the movie. You're like, there was something here that we just didn't get fully in terms of how that all coheres between him and Charles. But it's not overtly harmful to the movie either. You can fill in the blanks relatively well. It just feels like something's missing. Now, something that a lot of people were at odds with and or just outright criticized was not Jessica Chastain herself, but the character of that she played, which is your villainous entity here, this alien grouping that wants to control the Phoenix Force to basically rebuild their homeworld on Earth. The movie was over, and I was like, I told you this during the movie. The movie was over, and I was still like, huh? A lot of people complained that they didn't understand her motivations or that they weren't clear. And I was like, how? I mean, she literally says, like, her first line as the villain, what her motivations are. And that never changes. Ever. Throughout the movie. So I don't know what the fuck movie people were watching in regards to that. Is it a little thin character-wise? Sure.
Yeah.
But unclear? How?
I do think with those aliens, they felt a little like, underdeveloped, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I think it actually kind of worked.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gave them more of a little creepy feel.
Yeah, there was like a lurking menace feeling to them.
Yeah. And then they do disappear for a long time, and when they come back, you're like, oh yeah, these little creepy guys. It also helps that for aliens trying to mesh with humans, they chose like the most alien-looking people of all time. Literally, a guy looks like a frog.
Yeah, frog guy.
And everybody's just walking like this and running like this for some reason. What is this?
Them aliens, though. Yeah, man. I actually enjoyed the villainous thread here. I thought it was cool, albeit it needed more screen time. But we were intended to have more screen time, so we got to kind of take that into account too. So yeah, anything you want to add in addition to this mumbo jumbo that we've said so far?
No.
I think the score in this is okay. I think the score in this is fucking awesome, man.
Yeah, it's really good, and it does really help make it feel
bigger than probably is,
and like it deserves the slower pace.
Yeah. The score is excellent. It's so good that just watch the credits till the score finishes. It's really a really, really standout score, and yeah, like you say, it really amps up what you see on screen. Because this is a much more methodical film.
Yeah.
Albeit, despite the fact that there's obvious chunks missing out of it. But I think overall I have to give credit to Kinberg, who's getting a lot of heat, and he has owned up to the fact that, it's not the best film it could have been. So tip of the hat for that. But I got to give him credit for at least making a film that's cohesive and understandable out of the remains of what he intended to do. So, I mean, that's hard to do, and he did that. So, cool, man. Nothing but respect for that. Where does this stand for me in terms of? You already said that you prefer this over Apocalypse and Days of the Future Past, but not over First Class. Where does this stand for me? I think of the First Class movies, the four that have been in the First Class series. I think this is still the fourth, in line. I think the other three are exponentially better than it, but I don't hate this movie at all. I think it did a lot with what it had to, work with, man. And we all know what those production problems was. And you know what? It still kind of fits in relatively well. And I don't have a lot of issues with it, though it is lacking in some parts. So, give me your final thoughts and the final score, again, relative to this type of flick. Give it to me, man.
I think the biggest thing that I liked about the movie is that it is different feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I like the slower pace. I like that the badass score really helps sell it, It's not as goofy as Apocalypse or out there as Days of Future Past, and I like that it's more like a down to earth low movie. I think that's what I like the most.
Mm-hmm.
It does have issues, but I think that different feel is what made it put it into the part it is, the slot it is in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it a 7. I actually like how different it feels. Right. I mean, there is shortcomings, but I'm able to look past them.
Yeah.
Because it does have a unique feel.
And I agree. I mean, that's the best thing about this movie, in terms of making it stand out, that it does take a more methodical approach to it. And I'm kind of fascinated by how well that came together. Again, given the circumstances of production, it's that alone is fascinating to me, that they managed to give that feeling of a build up and expectation, and actually pull it off as well as they did. Now, I mean, say what you will about the circumstances of production, but that it came out like that still cohesively and kind of as tightly together as it could have been, I gotta give props to that. So it's one of those things where, from the movie fan side of me, is kind of more interested than in the actual movie itself type of element. Now, as for the movie itself, yeah, man, I enjoyed it quite a bit. There's a lot to like. I do feel that there's big chunks of this missing, and I do feel that some things added to it could have really made it even better than it is. I do, however, have to say that it did kind of get the shaft from a lot of people, and we all know what a large part of that motivation was. But I also felt that it deserves a little bit of a shaft, because it's not 100% what it could have been. But am I glad to have it in my collection? Yeah, man. I'm glad that at least it didn't end super shitty. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So fine. I would have preferred the 2-movie cut. Who knows if that's even possible anymore? But whatever. But whatever. This is what we get. So I'm gonna give it a 6.5. Maybe even a 6. I'm going to give it a very optimistic 6, that on a very good day I would feel generous and give it a 6.5. But that's not saying that it's horrid. I'm just saying...
Just watch that part of the video. That's not saying that it's horrid.
Yeah, I'm just saying that compared to the other movies, it stands in that place. But I think, like you, man, I think that those elements that you find positive in them, I think if they had been employed... on the scale that it should have been, this would have really been a solid motherfucker. But it is what it is. But anyway, tell us what you think about this movie, man. I do recommend it if you're a fan of the X-Men movies. If you're expecting the fucking comic, can we just get over the fact that that's not going to happen? Maybe not even under the MCU.
If you haven't even read the comic, then don't even complain.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people are just like, it's not the comic, and they just saw a YouTube video about it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, let us know what you think about that. Hit like, share, subscribe, and those notification buttons, because we're out.